This very interesting and intriguing manuscript in front of me is a so-called legendary, or collection of saints' lives. It comes from the Benedictine Abbey of St Pantaleon in Cologne and was written there probably in the middle of the 12th century. It's a very interesting manuscript because it contains 18 lives of saints that somehow were connected to Cologne, the metropolis of the Rhineland area at the time. And already when we open the manuscript, we see something extraordinary. Greeting us on the first page is a beautiful drawing describing the lineage of Saint Servatius. His legend is actually the first one to come up in the book. Servatius was the first bishop of Maastricht and the last bishop of Tongeren. And according to legends, he was a direct relative of Christ. And that is actually what this diagram tries to explain to us. We see here in the center a square with two female figures. And the inscriptions around their heads denote them as Anna and as Maria. Anna, or Saint Anne, was actually the grandmother of Christ. And her sister, as Maria, was not only the mother of Elizabeth, who brought forth St. John the Baptist, but also the mother of Emil, who had a son called Eliud, and he was the father of Saint Servatius. So Saint Servatius was directly connected to the lineage of Christ, and that made him a very important saint. This is probably one of the oldest examples of this legendary genealogy. There is a beautiful miniature in a manuscript in Krakow, which dates from about 1160. This could potentially be slightly earlier and therefore the oldest depiction in existence. When we turn the page, the illustration of the legend of Saint Servatius continue. Now, because Saint Servatius was a direct relative of Christ, according to legends, he wanted to visit the holy places where his illustrious predecessor had walked the earth before him. So he went to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage. And as he was praying in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, an angel appeared and told him that God had decided that Servatius would be the bishop of the Tungri, or the people of Tongeren, in present-day Belgium. Right before his death, the previous bishop of Tongeren, Saint Valentine, had put his crozier on the altar, stating that nobody would be able to lift that crozier unless they would be God's chosen successor. And people had tried to lift the crozier off the altar, but were not able to. The angel took Servatius from Jerusalem and walked all the way with him to Tongeren in Belgium, where the people were astonished to see this group arriving. Everybody gathered in the church, the Cathedral of Our Lady, and the angel walked up to the altar, took the staff, and presented Servatius with the staff, indicating that he is now the new bishop of the Tungri. Unfortunately, Servatius' reign as bishop was pretty brief. And the reason for that was because the Tungri decided to revert to their pagan ways. And therefore God decided to punish them. But alas, Servatius was trying to deliver the people of Tongeren, praying to God that he would spare them, even going to Rome on a pilgrimage to implore God to change his mind. But of course, God doesn't easily change his mind. But God did send St. Peter, who was of course the prince of the apostles and the holder of the keys to heaven. And Peter appeared to Servatius in a vision. And in that vision, Peter handed over one of the keys of heaven to Servatius himself, basically stating that while he could not save his entire flock in Tongeren, he was allowed to let individual people into heaven. You could almost say he got the key to the back door. And because of that, Servatius decided to leave Tongeren and to transfer the relics that were in the Church of Tongeren to Maastricht, to establish a new diocese there. And in Maastricht, he met his end in 384 AD and was buried in what nowadays is St. Servatius Basilica. The drawings here beautifully illustrates part of the legends. we see here at the bottom a group of clergy and layfolk surrounding the altar of the cathedral in Tongeren. And right in the center, we see the bishop's staff, the crozier that was deposited on the altar. And right next to it, there's a tiny little detail, a circular or spherical object that seems to be emitting a few flames. Could be a reference to the episcopal ring, but it could also be a reference to the star or the comet that was supposed to guide Servatius all the way from Metz to Rome when he was doing his pilgrimage. What is interesting is that actually this narrative starts at the bottom, because from the bottom we move to the top, where we actually see the angel handing over the crozier to Saint Servatius, establishing him as Bishop of the Tungri. And what makes this really interesting is the fact that the crozier looks very much like the crozier that still survives today in the treasury of the Basilica of Saint Servatius. This manuscript is really a very important, a very wonderful collection of saints' lives that pose an intriguing question: why was the life of Saint Servatius of Maastricht put here at the front of the manuscript? And why is this the only one to be illustrated with these drawings? Questions that don't allow for an easy answer, but fortunately, it doesn't detract from the beauty of this manuscript.